In this problem, they're asking us to find all extrema of f of x when it's equal to cosine of pi x on the closed interval 0 to 1/6. So since it's a closed interval, we are going to find the derivative, find critical values, and then plug our critical values and our endpoints back into the original. So first I'm going to find the derivative. And this is a chain rule problem because pi x would be your inner function, cosine would be your outer. So chain rule, derivative of the outer times derivative of the inner. Remember, pi is just a constant, so it's like having 2x there. So the derivative of pi x would just be pi. So when I rewrite this, it would be negative pi times sine of pi x. Now, in order for me to find my critical values, I've got to find where the derivative equals 0 and where it's undefined. Well, the function sine is undefined nowhere. And since there's no quotient in for the angle, that means that sine of pi x is not undefined anywhere. So I'm only looking for where this derivative equals 0. Divide both sides by negative pi, and you get 0 equals sine of pi x. So this pi is going to change a little bit how we have to think about our solution. We're looking for where sine of pi x equals 0. And indirectly, we're looking for where sine equals 0. And sine equals 0 at pi over 2. No, excuse me. I'm thinking backwards. Sine is 0 at where y is 0. So at 0 and at pi and at 2 pi. And we could just keep going. So at 0 and pi. And if you look at your function, sine of 0 is 0. So x would have to equal what to make it sine of 0? X would have to equal 0. And then sine of pi equals 0. So what would x have to equal in order to make this sine of pi? X would have to equal 1. And then we could just continue going around the unit circle. Well, this is a closed interval, luckily. So my closed interval includes 0 to 1/6. So this second critical value is not included. So my only critical value on the interval given is 0. So now I do my test points, because this is absolute. I take my test points, my test values, and plug them into the original. And we're going to test our critical value of 0, which also happens to be an endpoint. And we're going to test our endpoint into the original, because we're looking for absolute. So f of 0, when I plug it into the original, that would be cosine of 0, because pi times 0 is 0. And cosine of 0 is 1. And then f of 1/6, when I plug it in, is cosine of pi over 6. And if you remember the trick I showed you with your hand, pi over 6 would be this finger. So if I hold it down, cosine's on top, so there's 3 fingers. So that would be square root of 3 over 2. Now, the question is, if you're not familiar with square root of 3 over 2, then is that greater than 1 or less than 1? Well, we know that square root of 3 is between square root of 1 and square root of 4. And that would make it between 1/2 and 1. Because if it's between, then this would be 1/2 square root of 3 over 2 and 1. So square root of 3 over 2 is between 1/2 and 1. Therefore, it's got to be less than 1. So this is your absolute minimum. This is your absolute maximum. And the absolute minimum would be square root of 3 over 2. Absolute maximum at x equals 0. And the absolute maximum would be 1.